Hello, and it's that time of the week again. I mean, it seems like it's flying upon us already, but we are at the end of match two in the National League, and we are here on National League Natter to review all of the goals, all of the action, and all of the key talking points in match day number two. So joining me as always on a Monday is Chris. So how are you feeling this week, mate? How did you view the action in the league overall?
I think it was a good week, to be fair. From my point of view, a bit happier than last week, but yeah, it's been an action-packed week in the National League as always. So
Yeah,
looking
absolutely,
forward to
absolutely,
review
and
it.
I'm sure we'll come on to both our teams later on, but it feels sort of not right for me to sort of gloat about my team yet when before we probably talk about the action because it's the first thing on the agenda. I want to touch upon the horrific event in the Gateshead game. So it was, for people that don't know, Gateshead were playing at Woking, and Gateshead continued the really good start to the season with a 2-0 win. But unfortunately, that scoreline and the win for many of Gateshead players and management got overshadowed and overcast by a horrific injury to Greg Ollie, who obviously scored a hat-trick on opening weekend. So it just shows the juxtaposition of football, such a high on opening weekend to such a devastating low in match day number two. But the reason why we wanted to talk about it a little bit is the nature of it. It was, I mean, I don't want to be over dramatic for people that haven't seen it, and obviously if you do want to go and see it, then view it at your own sort of discretion. Because Chris, I don't think it's like unrealistic for me to say it's probably one of the worst, most brutal tackles I've seen in a good number of years. I get things can happen on a football pitch, and I get there was tackles flying in that period, like I seen a Woking fan say, and maybe the referee could have stopped the game in a couple of tackles to, prevent the following 30 seconds. But from players' perspective, I just don't know what the necessary need is to go in from behind, jump down, lunge down, 2-footed from behind, and just completely with force take out your opponent's leg and ankle. I just don't really get what was going through Dion Kelly Evans's head, really. And as sort of standing captain and sort of in the captaincy group at Woking, you kind of expect, more from a leadership point of view. You would expect somebody to be able to keep their head a little bit more than that. And, I think, obviously, I don't want to come here and start slating his character because I don't know that, and that's not very fair for me to do. But the one thing I will say is I was disappointed to see when the severity of Ollie's injury became apparent. There was certain Woking players like Kean Harris, who, by all accounts on social media, by the way, to just give a good shout out to him, he stayed with Ollie for 45 minutes after the injury, trying to like distress him and whatever. So that's the good side of it. But as captain, he didn't really show any sort of immediate concern or immediate sort of sort of compassion to the situation he'd caused. And I just, before we actually go on to talk about the action and the win for Gateshead, I just wanted your sort of thoughts on that, and like if you have anything to sort of back up what I've just been saying, really.
Yeah, I think obviously it's one of those situations where it's such a freak injury, and to be fair, the build-up into that referee, who I've seen probably 20 times since I've been watching National League football with Barnet, he's not the best referee in the league, and I think the Gateshead and working players, managers, and staff will agree with that, where the play could have been stopped in that flurry where tackles were just going in right, left, and centre. So, yeah, it was a horrid challenge, but I think the referee has to do a bit more to protect the players in that situation. But I think you've also got to give credit to Gateshead players. After an injury like that, there is a lot of trauma that goes into that kind of situation, and for them to be able to go and also go and win that game is great. Great credit to them both mentally and physically in that game.
Well, I think obviously I agree to an extent about the referee, otherwise I wouldn't have mentioned it. But also, the referee is not in control of Dion Kevin's Ellie's sort of decision making to go and make it, such a rash challenge like that. So it's a difficult one to weigh up. But I think that's a really good point you made, because in the post match interview, Rob Elliott said if it was down to him, he was very distressed, so he was ready to call the game off. And it was the sort of players that kind of took the sort of responsibility and said we were going to do this for Greg, and look, go into the football now in terms of responding with a positive sort of showing and keeping their 100% record alive. A 2-0 win for your teammate is the best way to do that. And look, I think I've said it for multiple times. I'd hate to be a Gateshead fan at the minute. Well, I'd like to be a Gateshead fan, but I hate to be a Gateshead fan at the same time, because there's so much uncertainty with the ground and what they can do in terms of not being able to go up, but can still go down. But they play such probably the most attractive brand of football in this division that watching them at times is a joy, and just the way they move the ball and have so many different patterns and shapes is ridiculous. And look, they make football at this level look easy at times, and I have no doubt that they'll be up there. But it must be frustrating as a Gateshead fan to know that you can be up there and you can be passing teams to death and you can win, maybe a big percentage of your games, but not be able to do anything with that and progress with that. But from a Gateshead point of view, it's almost the perfect start, albeit a horror injury, almost a perfect start for a season. And I think they're fastly becoming one of people's favourites for a reason in this division, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they've looked really strong in the first two opening games, and I think last year with the stadium lease, obviously that's put a bit of a burden, maybe a downer on what happened last year. But even last year was a great performance to finish in the playoffs. Not able to play in it, but to be able to go in the playoffs, and the size of their budget is, I think, a really good achievement from the whole team. And to be 100% record after two games, it's a good achievement, and I think they're going to keep pushing high. I really do think they'll be in the top three this season. I know the injury's not helped at all, but I still think even with the injury, they've got that style of play, which it doesn't matter which players are playing. They've got that system which will work against most teams. So I think they look really strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a quick sort of standout performer before we talk about Woking briefly and the sort of start to the season is Regan Booty, who obviously signed for Gateshead last year. He was a target of Oldham's, and that was public knowledge, and he chose Gateshead at the time. And look, he got 2 assists. He assists both goals yesterday, and he had a real sort of standout performance, and I think he is one of the more creative outlets in this division. So yeah, I'm interested to see his progression this year for sure. Just on the flip side of that, then we are looking at a Woking side that we said on opening day we don't really know what their fans expect of them in terms of, they were embroiled in a relegation battle for the majority of last season, and they probably are punching above the means a little bit in this division from time to time, but they did well to survive last year, and now they've started this campaign with 2 defeats from 2, and so I'm just looking, so they've had 2 defeats from 2 games. They
Not scored 1 goal.
Yeah, they did you say they haven't scored a goal yet?
They
Is
haven't
that right?
scored. They've
They
got
haven't
2 red
scored.
cards, 0 goals.
Yeah, they haven't scored, and they've conceded 3, and obviously they picked up a red card on the first game as well. So I know it's very early, but if you're looking at this from a Woking point of view, number one, is there alarm bells ringing a little bit about a discipline issue? And number two, what would your sort of fix be to get Woking out of this very early hole, albeit, but losing is a mentality thing, and 2 losses can soon turn into 5 losses, and then before you know it, you're chasing the rest of the league. So from your perspective, what do you think Woking need to do?
I think it's I really think Woking will struggle. I said it last week on the pod. I don't think they're going to do very well this season, and I think to score 0 goals in your first 2 games. I know they've played some 2 tough sides, Altrincham away, and to play Gateshead, probably one of the best teams in the division. But I do think they're going to struggle. And it doesn't help that they've had 2 red cards. And as you said, is there a discipline issue? Potentially, because the amount of tackles that were flying in, the amount of fouls they've had in their first 2 games is a high number compared with other teams in the division. And I think coming off last season where they scraped safety, they could be down in it again. And I think they just need to kind of get what they were back to when 2 years ago, when they were in the playoffs, when they were almost beat Bromley in the playoffs. But now they're at the bottom, struggling and not scoring a goal in the league. So I think it's a tough one for Woking. I do think they'll be down there this season.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely one to keep an eye on, and hopefully it works out for Woking fans. But look, like we said last week, and we'll probably be saying this till about week number 6. There's still only been 2 games played, so you can't really read too much into it, even though it doesn't. The early signs don't look promising for Woking, granted, but they've still got 44 games to put that right, So like it's a long season, but I think now we should talk about. I don't know whether I can call this a surprise result of the weekend, or maybe. But I think it fits well in with. So last week we had the pleasure on the podcast of speaking to Sutton manager Steve Morison in an exclusive interview, and one of our friends in one of the chats, I don't know if he's in it, he clipped it because in the interview Steve Morison said, we could go and beat Altrincham 4-5-0, but I doubt that's going to happen in this division. Now, lo and behold, what was the score in that game? It was Sutton United 5, Altrincham 0. Now, in terms of the sort of, we sat here last week and say a 1-1 against Tamworth on opening day, would they be disappointed with that? The answer is probably yes. But that is how you respond, right? Go into a team that many people felt last year were again up there with Gateshead in one of the better footballing sides. Obviously, we said that they'd maybe struggle this season with losing such a creative outlet with both goals and assists in Chris Clark. But to go there, to produce that sort of performance against a team like Alti is staggering, really, from what we know about Altrincham. And I think it just shows how strong Sutton will be this year. And look, if you're a Sutton fan, you've got to be absolutely buzzing with that result, haven't you? Really, I mean, so I'm just having a look here. They were 4-0 up at half time, which in terms of your first home game in the National League, it's dreamland, really, and it's stuff really sort of dreamland stuff. But yeah, so what are your thoughts? Firstly, on Sutton and Sutton's approach, and like obviously Mystic, Steve Morison calling it in the interview a little bit, but then obviously we'll touch upon Alti and Alti's struggles after this, I guess.
Yeah, fair play for predicting that, because I would not have thought Sutton would have won 5-0. That's the National League. It's so crazy. You're going to get, probably next week there's going to be a mental result, but we'll see what about that. But no, 4-0 up at half time is pretty insane. And for Sutton, I think they're getting their bearings a little bit in the division. Obviously, with Tamworth, Steve Morison was saying about the pitch and the heat wasn't really ideal, and something that they really expected when the fixtures came out. And to play on their new pitch and to win 5-0 is a great start to the season for them. And they're going to be up there. They're going to be another team that going to be in and around the playoffs, and I think they're going to be a tough team to beat, especially at home with that new pitch. I think it does make a difference. But yeah, really positive start for Sutton.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think in terms of an Aldringham perspective and persuasion, it's obviously that we know they won opening day, against Woking in quite an ill-tempered sort of affair. A red card apiece in that game, I believe. But we did predict a little bit, just simply losing an enigma with so many goals and so many assists to his name in Chris Clark, and replacing them with different type of players, really, maybe for a different style. I mean, we had a little bit of a chat in the group chat the other day. Is they took Joe Nuttall from us on loan in the summer, and he is a striker that I think it's fair to say doesn't have a good relationship with Oldham fans, because for his size and stature, he's deemed as quite a lazy player, and he doesn't put himself around, or he never really did for the team. And look, I'm not here to dig players out, but it's interesting now that I looked on Alti's social media, and there was 5 or 6 fans on Twitter calling for the loan to be terminated and saying that Joe Nuttall is the laziest player we've ever seen. So maybe it wasn't just Oldham fans saying it. Maybe there is something there, but like that's for another time, I guess. But in terms of Alti, obviously these freak results can happen. I don't think there's anything to worry about there in terms of like Alti being in sort of any sort of immediate danger this year. But obviously they need to fill that gap of Chris Clark, and I don't think they've done it effectively yet. Obviously the window is open till March really in this division, so they've got time, and you can sort of see how the season goes. Get 10, 12 games in if you wish, and then try and make your moves. But yeah, what do you think from an Alti persuasion?
Yeah, I would agree with you. The loss of Chris Clark is absolutely massive, and I think it's not even just his goals or his assists; it's his presence in the team. Like, if you're losing a key player last season, it's not just that player individually; it's the whole team. How they see your star man, it's going to create a mental difference for Altrincham. But I still think they'll be okay. I think they'll be happy with a mid-table finish, but I think you got to give time. I think I saw someone said that they should sack Phil Parkinson, which is such a crazy thing to say after what he's done last season. So I think some fans maybe need to get a bit of perspective in that they've cashed in on a player that they will eventually invest into maybe the club, stadium, facilities. But yeah, I think Altrincham will be fine, honestly, but it just takes time. And to lose a key player, it's one of those, it will take time, but I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Definitely. I think they'll be. I don't look at Alti and think, wow, they're going to be in danger. I just don't know whether they can reach the heights that they reached last season. But moving on, really, we're gonna talk about now probably the tie of the round for the neutrals in a 6-goal thriller, and it was Eastleigh 4, Fylde 2. Now this game had a bit of everything really. So Fylde raced into a 2-0 lead. They were 2-0 up by the 28th minute of the game, thanks to who else, Chris? Who else? But Fylde have scored 5 goals this year, and Nick Horton have scored all 5. So we talk about Chris Clark being valuable to Alti. That is Fylde's version of Chris Clark, or maybe that's a bit unfair for me to say because he's his own man. But in terms of a talisman, that's the sort of comparison there. But then look, they got the 2-0 lead and blew it really. And look, from what I was reading from the fans' comments in the match report, once Fylde got into the 2-0 lead, I don't know whether it was a mentality shift, kind of taking the foot off the gas, thinking they could just cruise the next 60 minutes of the game. But with a team like Eastleigh, you can't do that to anyone in this division really. But with the prowess and the attacking prowess that sort of Eastleigh have at the disposal, you can't do that. And look, they fought back, and before we knew it, it was 2-2 on the 48th minute mark. So look, Fylde were 2-1 up going into half time, and then that man McCallum decides to enter the National League stage again properly now this season with a 2-goal haul, and then so that makes it 3-2 to Eastleigh at this point. And then just to wrap up the win, you then have a EFL / National League veteran, now probably in his, I don't know how many seasons he's done, but Chris Maguire scoring with 20 minutes from time. But you'd be forgiven to think that the action was done in this game because in the 85th minute, Eastleigh's defender, I don't know whether I'm going to butcher this or not, but I'm going to go for. In fact, Chris, do you want to have a go before I offend someone?
Put me on the spot here. I'm going to say Franchulette.
Franchulette. We'll go with that because that's something better than what I could have produced. Got a red card after 2 yellow cards. So that, look, Chris, that game had everything for the neutrals, but I sort of enter stage Paul McCallum for another season, and it'll be interesting to see whether he can sort of replicate the numbers that he had last year, because they were incredible, really. But from a Fylde perspective, they've now scored 5 goals in 2 games. Nick Horton scored all 5, like I've said, but they have now conceded, what's that? So they've conceded 7 goals, in 2 games. So is the problems defensively? How do you see it both defensively, but then just touch upon Nick Horton a little bit, and then touch upon your sort of opinions on Eastleigh's performance as well?
Yeah, it kind of seems like Fylde are just relying on Nick Horton as that star man, and he's just going to score as many goals as he can, and then kind of letting the team just try and defend, but not doing a great job. But no, I think Fylde will be fine. Like, it's one of those, they've got that star man who will get 20 plus goals himself, and they have a good team as well. So I think it's concerning that they conceded 7 in 2 games, which is really tough. If you want to get points, you can't be conceding more than 2-3 goals a game in this division. But yeah, I think Fylde will be disappointed to go 2-0 up and then also lose the game by a 2-goal margin, which is disappointing. But from an Eastleigh point of view, they'll be very happy. Two wins from 2, 6 goals scored, and to keep Paul McCallum, who was linked heavily with Southend, but because of whatever reason, didn't happen. So they've got a really strong team. I really like Eastleigh this year, especially with Paul McCallum, Chris Maguire. They've got goals in their team, and they seem that they've trying to shut up shop a little bit with a clean sheet last week, and they're going in the right direction. So I think they'll have a better season than last season for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And now on to probably another high scoring game in this division this week. It seems like the goals were raining everywhere in the National League, if I'm being honest. So we've had a 5-0, and now we're going to bring you a 4-0. And it was Boston United's maiden game at this level at home. And it was sort of a nightmare day, we're being honest. I mean, like we said, we don't really know what Boston fans are expecting in terms of. I think they know that the team are going to just maybe put up a fight and probably be expected to go down. But as long as they sort of battle and put up a fight, you'd be a happy kind of situation. But it looked like maybe they just couldn't match Forest Green Rovers on Saturday, and they were flying with a 4-0 away victory at Boston. And now, this is a name that is synonymous with Forest Green Rovers. This is his second spell with the football club, I believe. It's Christian Deutsch. Now, a bit like McCallum, if you feed this man service, he's going to get hatfuls of goals at this division. And look, he got off to a fire, 2 goals a brace on opening day. Just shows his pedigree at this level. And look, like we said before with the Sutton game, it was 3-0 at half time, so the game was done at half time really. So Deutsch got 2 in the 3rd minute with his first with an absolute flying start, and then just approaching the hour mark, but also with 2 was I think, hang on, it's my computer froze. 1 second, I'm just having some technical issues. Chris, do you want to just take us away while I just try and figure out what's going on with my computer?
Yeah.
Set?
Lee and Circum also got a double, which is good. But Boston, they've had 2 home games where they conceded 7 goals. Say that as you will, but I think newly promoted is a bit concerning. But I think they're gonna do their own thing this year. Yeah, and I do think they'll go down. But for a Forest Green point of view, they're absolutely smashing it. Like, scored seven goals already in 2 games, and yeah, I'm not really looking forward to Tuesday night when they come to the Hive. But I think Christian Deutsch, he's a player that will keep scoring goals. If he gets that service, and Forest Green they're an attacking team. They're going to get. I think they'll be one of the top scorers this division, with probably Gateshead and Barnet. And for them, really great start. And especially for them, it's a tough start. They're going to have 4 away games in a row just because of their pitch being laid. So to have already 4 from 2 games is a really good start. So really impressed with Forest Green so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm back now. I've managed to rescue the computer. We're back, and we are ready to move on to a team that, by no means on purpose, did we forget to speak about last week in Yeovil Town. Well, it's Braintree and Yeovil, really. Obviously, Braintree were at home again, first home game at this level, and they were playing Yeovil Town, who got the 1-0 win, and yeah, by all accounts, were good value for their win, really. Morgan Williams got the second half winner, and it seemed like they were kind of, after losing to Hartlepool on opening weekend, it seemed like this is a way to respond. And looking at the stats now here, Chris, it looked like Yeovil were kind of in control of the game, and they that they were deserved winners. It looked like Yeovil had a lot of the ball, but maybe not a lot of clear-cut chances in the game. But I guess good teams always take the 1 or 2 chances that they will get in a game like that if there's not a lot of chances across the board, and that's what Yeovil have done, isn't it, really?
Yeah, they'll be really happy to bounce back after a disappointing start on opening day to lose at home to Hartlepool, but good win away from home, and they'll be happy, I think, with their start. If they probably saw before the season, if they could get 3 points out of the first 2, they'd be quite happy. And I've been impressed with Yeovil. Last season, obviously, they really did take the National League South by storm and won the league by a huge margin. And they're just going to keep ticking away, going game by game. And I think for Yeovil, just to have a consolidation season and make sure they keep their status in the National League and then push back up to the divisions after really it's been a shocking last 10 years going from the Championship down to the 6th tier of English football. It's about rebuilding, and I think they've done a good start, so they'll be happy with their start for sure.
Absolutely. And then from a Braintree perspective, where are we with this? Because yes, they are a newly promoted side, but it looks like they had a bit of a cash injection in the summer. They were making what we thought were some really good signings in F Young and the other lad's name escaped my
John
head at
Akendi.
the minute. Akendi, yeah, ex-Lincoln, of course.
That man.
And look, I said we played them at home on opening day, and I said that the sort of game plan is very, like, you can work it out quite quickly with Braintree. I don't know whether they set up the same sort of way, but I'm presuming they did. It was very, route one into the 2 big target men, and if you can defend that well and you can clock on that early enough, they've not really got any sort of plan B. And in terms of, obviously I know it's the first time in the division for a good number of years, and maybe they are just expecting to have a relegation battle, but it is a disappointing start for them, really, isn't it? 4 goals conceded, non-scored. Yeah, like where are we at with Braintree, especially on the sort of idea that they've had a little bit of a cash injection and signed some big names.
I was impressed with their signings a lot, to be fair. Like Effiong is a proven National League striker, did unbelievable at Aldershot. We had him for a bit. I wasn't too impressed when he was at the Hive, but yeah, they've got a good squad, but I think they're just trying to get their bearings in the National League. Obviously, they're not full time. They're not one of the full-time teams, so they are a mix of part-time and full-time, which I think does have a difference, but that's not really an excuse for them. But I think they've done well. So I think they'll be disappointed with the start, but I think just give them time. And also, Effiong banged in goals for Dagenham. He was a player, but it takes time, especially it's like with Barnet and Braintree. We brought in so many players, you've got to take your time to adjust. So yeah, it just takes time.
Do you expect Braintree to have enough then to sort of scave off relegation in the first season?
I think it'll be tough. I think it'll be tough for them to stay in the division, but I think they'll come just short.
Perfect. Now, I promise you, I haven't been waiting for this moment. It just happens It just happens that we are at that point of the running order now. And yes, people might come at me and say it's only 2 games. And yes, we've not really had a challenge as such. But also, I think saying that is quite disrespectful to the teams we've placed. And look, I've been so used to seeing an Oldham side concede goals and not be able to score. That is very nice to be 2 games in, 6 points from 6, scored 4. But most importantly, Chris, we've not conceded a goal yet. And look, I think we showed a different side to our approach yesterday in terms of it wasn't a game for the purists, really. It wasn't an exciting game. But look, we hung in there on a really sort of warm, dry pitch, a bit like Steve Morison was saying last week for Sutton. We experienced it as well. Like the pitch was really warm. It was like 27 degrees in at Wealdstone's pitch. So it was really warm for the players, and it was really slow, sort of a slow-paced game. But we hung in there. We were the sort of aggressive side, hunting for that winner. We made the subs at the right point and got a wonderful headed sort of. I don't know whether you've seen the highlights, but I still really don't know how Harry Charsley scored, really, because he kind of headed the ball, but it's one of them where it's like a diving header, and 9 times out of 10 it loops up and goes into the crowd. But this one managed to loop up and like loop over the head of the goalkeeper and go into like the far corner of the goal. But look, it just shows we've got that sort of defensive resolution to our side as well, you know, now with the absolute mammoth edition of Manny Month. I talked him up a bit last week as well, but I think at this division, I think he's an absolute monster of player. Like, you know, he's 6 foot plus. He's built like a physical specimen. I was going to swear on the podcast, but I like to keep it PG. But he's built. I don't know if you've ever seen Game of Thrones, but there's a guy on there called Giant, and he's pretty much built like the Game of Thrones Giant. And I think just that sort of defensive solidity and adding to the attacking threats of, you know, Mike Fondop, a Chegbum, Alex Reid, and people are forgetting as well. I'm not getting too ahead of myself, but we're 2 wins from 2, no goals conceded yet. Without arguably, people could say probably top 3, top 5 best player in the league in James Norwood. You know, he's still to come back in. So all the signs are positive. I'm not going to come in here and say Oldham are going to win the league by 100 points because it is only 2 games in, but all the signs are positive, and I am getting a bit of nosebleed territory seeing Oldham in the top 3 of the division, no matter how many games have gone, really, Chris. I don't know what your sort of thoughts and opinions are on the game, whether you've seen the highlights or if you agree with that sort of sentiment.
I think you're happy. You're a very happy man. But, you know, fair play to Oldham. Like, I think they'll do well. They really do. They've gone so under the radar this season with like the likes of Barnet and like Sutton, Forest Green being said as the title favourites, whatever you like to say. Like, I wouldn't really read into it that much, but a good win because Wealdstone have a really good home record. They're tough to beat at Grosvenor Vale, so I think they'll be really happy with that win. And 4 goals, none conceded, is a really good start to the season, and I think they're going to push on, but they do have a tough run coming up, so it'll be interesting to see how they do against those stronger sides and see if they can keep winning these games. And then if not, then you just go game by game and see what happens at
absolutely. I think that's the important thing now. I think that's the important thing. Like, obviously, no disrespect to Braintree and Wealdstone, but we do have ambitions of, you know, getting out of this division the 3rd time we're trying, and we're going to have a lot tougher tests to come with that. And look, but I feel like from what we've seen from us, it looks like we're more sort of set up for the battle now. We're more sort of set up for the war, and like we've got Fylde on Tuesday night at home, which will be probably the first test. But like I said, I don't want to be one-dimensional and be disrespectful to Fylde, but I think it's fair to say you keep Nick Horton quiet. That might be easier said than done, but you keep Nick Horton quiet, and then you've always got a chance, you know. So it'll be an interesting one to keep an eye out. And look, I think with our fan base as well, it's important because there is going to become a time in everyone's season, even if you're going for the league, there'll become a period where you lose maybe 2-3 games on the spin or 2 games on the spin, and, you know, we start conceding goals. And I think it's important for us as a fan base now not to be as quick to turn, because Oldham fans have had such, you know, I've spent my time watching Oldham in like the top half of League One for quite a big majority of it, and then obviously the decline happened quite quickly. But so the expectation is there, the sort of demands are there from the fan base, and I think this season it's just kind of tempering them a little bit and just kind of expect to be at the right end of the table and expect good performances, but know that any sort of season comes with a little bit of rough patches as well, and it's about how you sort of bounce back and sort of adapt to them, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think for Oldham, it's been like as you said, it's been a tough 20 years for Oldham. You know, they've gone through relegation. I think I saw a stat. You may be able to tell me if this is true. They didn't finish in like the top half of any division for I think it was like 10 plus years or something like
Yeah.
something crazy. Like I read it. I was like, that can't be true. And I looked back. I was like, oh, it's true. Like that is so. But it's been a
And
tough time. But I think Oldham are coming back.
just to add to, so you know how much misery I've had to uphold. So I'm only 25, and I've had this is my 20th year as a season ticket holder. But in that time, and then we'll move on to we got to go to an ad break and then the second half. But in that time, this is the first time we've won our first two league games in a season since the 2010-2011 season. So pretty much 14
Wow.
years ago since we've won our opening two. So forgive me for thinking that could be a positive omen, but like I said, there's plenty of football to be played. Who knows what's going to happen? But I think that would be a perfect time for us to cut to our wonderful sponsors, and we will be back with you in just a couple of minutes. So we're back. You've just heard from our sponsors, and now it's time for the second half of the podcast. So again, we are starting people might be thinking, what have you come straight in from a break with a 0-0 result for? And the reason for this is quite fairly and quite rightly, we got a little bit of stick last week off Yeovil fans and off Hartlepool fans for just bypassing the game completely, and that wasn't anything purposeful. It was just, trying to cover 12 games on a podcast and keep it under an hour is a difficult task. So when you're getting towards the end, things are going to slip your mind. So we are going to give Hartlepool their airtime right now and try and talk for 2 or 3 minutes on a 0-0 draw. So Chris has said he would like this task, so I'm going to give it to Chris, and he can give you his best shot at talking about a 0-0 draw. So go for it, Chris.
Thank you for that privilege. To be fair, Hartlepool have got off to a great start. Obviously, 2 tough games to go to Yeovil, who nearly promoted away, is not an easy task, and then to play Southend, who I think Southend are a really tough one at the moment. Obviously, they've signed a couple new players with the new ownership, but their squad depth is still quite low. But I think Hartlepool will be really happy with their start. You know, to have 4 points out of possible 6 against 2 really tough opponents and still not to concede a goal is a great start to their season. But they did get a red card in defender Waterfall. He got a red card, second yellow in the 49th minute. So for them to be able to hold out for a good 40 minutes and to keep a draw, I think they'll be happy with their start. And from a Southend perspective, all 2 draws to start their season isn't the worst start. You're not losing games, but maybe it's their attacking threat that is slightly lacking. But I think Hartlepool will be the happier side from that fixture.
I think it's an interesting one for Hartlepool with me, and I think it's just a little bit of a conversation between us, and let us know what you think on Twitter. But if you're a Hartlepool fan, what is your expectation this year? Because obviously you've been in this division now for a little time, and it's well documented with their ownership issues with Raj Singh and stuff like that. So, what do you think the expectation for Hartlepool would be within the fan base, and do you think they can sort of achieve what their expectations might be?
I would, if I was a Hartlepool fan, I'd say you want to try and compete for playoffs. That doesn't mean be in the playoffs, but you want to be up there trying to compete for maybe a 5th, 6th, 7th position in the table. But obviously, it's easier said than done. But I think Hartlepool last season, obviously it was their first season back in the National League, so I think it's tough. It is tough, but they've sort of got their getting together. I think they made some really nice signings that I've liked, and I think 4 points from 6 is a good start. So I think around the playoffs would be the fans' expectation.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Hartlepool are they're probably going under the radar a little bit, like we just talked about Oldham, and I think they're the sort of teams really that are sort of best placed. I quite like the idea of like going under the radar and not really being on people's things, because you can just focus on yourself game by game. Then there's not a lot of external noise, not a lot of external expectation. I think Hartlepool are probably in that same boat as well. And yeah, so I think that is one to keep a look on. But again, I'm going to give you the privilege, considering we're at that time of the podcast, to speak about your Mighty Bees. Obviously, having a really disappointing opening day, but then bouncing back in good fashion, albeit to a sort of an Ebbsfleet side that we expect to struggle this year. But again, you can only beat what's in front of you. I seen your tweet at weekend, and it literally just said, steady with a load of Y's. So yeah, I take it away and tell us what you thought of that performance.
I'm just going to start. I would do a podcast just talking about Callum Stead, because he is that good at football. Like, Callum Stead is so. I don't have enough words to talk about Callum Stead, but no, it was a good performance. It was much improved from, I think, the Halifax game. First half, we were trying. We had a lot of the ball again, but we didn't really break down Ebbsfleet. But they had a lot of chances. I think they would have been disappointed to not have scored before they did. But Callum Stead with a brace, he's really kicking into his stride. Last season, bringing him in from Brackley, he didn't start for the first probably 3 months, because coming into full-time football is something that Dean Brennan's talked about multiple times with multiple players. It's a tough gig to go from training 2 times a week in the evening to going full-time in the mornings every day. But yeah, it was a much improved performance. Second half was unbelievable. We were on the attack probably every 2 minutes, putting the balls into the box. Nicky Kabamba would be disappointed not to score, but Callum Stead again with another goal, and I think he's really going to be a key player for us, one to watch for sure. And I think he scored 9 goals last season, but I think he can get up to 15 this year. And we've kicked off the board. We're off the mark, and I think we're getting there. And a couple of new players introduced. Joe Kizzy played his first start for the club. Danny Collins was on the bench, but I was really happy with the performance, and I'm happy with the 3 points going into the next 2 games, which are going to be tough for us. So I'm pleased with how we played.
Absolutely. And then from an Ebbsfleet point of view, again, tough start to the season, really. But I think their expectation would just be to survive relegation as well, wouldn't it? Would you say you agree with that sort of sentiment?
Yeah, I would agree, 100%. I think they've had a tough start. To play against Barnet and Gateshead is not. I think when you see the fixtures as an Ipswich fan, you'll be like, if we can get a point, that's really good. We lose the 2 games, we lose the 2 games. It's not a big deal, because Barnet and Gateshead are going to be up there. And you know what? I thought they were all right. I didn't think they were going to set the league alight, but I think they had enough to stay in the division. And they've got a striker in Dominic Poland who will get goals for them. He'll get 10, 15, 100%. And they had chances. They did have chances to score, but they just had that missing edge in front of goal. But I didn't think they were awful, I'll be honest. But they gave us a good test. But I think our quality just showed in the end.
Just so dead quickly, because I know we've got a couple more games to touch upon, and then we're going to do a very brief look ahead to the Tuesday fixtures, and then do our bronze, silver, and gold player performances. But I mentioned in match day number 1 that one of your signings, just in terms of intrigue and how he gets on, that like really interests me, is Jermaine Francis. Has he featured at all yet? Has he got any minutes? Like, what's the sort of story?
I think he came off the bench last week at Halifax, but he wasn't on the bench on Saturday. So
Interesting.
that's one we'll have to wait again. But that's a player that was playing part-time last season. So maybe it's an integration process. We might see it in 10 or 12 games' time.
Mm-hmm. Sure, for sure. I guess now we go and touch upon a team that, even though it pains me to say it, I have, number one, been quietly impressed with the transfer business, but I would never publicly admit that. And number two, they've started the season very well. But I would say that the Rochdale fan base, I think, are getting a little bit ahead of themselves, because I've seen a lot of comments after this result that saying that, oh, it's not good enough, we should have turned it into 2 wins from 2. And, you know, I point at home to Dagenham and Redbridge, considering, you know, the problems that Dagenham and Redbridge caused teams last season and the talent that they've got in the side. I think is a very good result. Obviously, that Rochdale have pretty much, with the exception of like Rodney, Mitchell, Henderson, they have a lot of new faces to integrate into the side, and you know it could take them a few weeks to get going. So they've got to be happy with that result, right? And look, I think 4 points from 2 games is a good start, albeit one of them was a newly promoted side away from home on opening day. But yeah, from a Rochdale perspective, Chris, what are you thinking? Like, do you think they've got enough about them to push for a playoff place, or do you think they'll just miss out? Like, where do you sort of see it? And like, what is your sort of thoughts on this result as a standalone, really?
Yeah, I think it's a good result, to be fair, because Dagenham, I think, will be a team that will go under the radar. I'll be honest, they've got some serious players, you know, and from a Rochdale perspective, I think they'll be, from both sides, taking 4 points from the first 2 games, which we're playing both one at home, one away. I think both sides will be happy with how they've performed. I think with how they've got those points is strong, and from a Rochdale perspective, I think they'll be very close to a playoff place. I think they'll compete until Matchday 44, 46. I think they'll be still in the hunt, but I see them falling short by about 3 to 5 points. I just think they just don't have that edge that I think other teams who are a bit stronger will do. And for Dagenham, I think, again, maybe just a mid-table finish will be good. And to see what Ben Strevens has done over the past 12, 18 months, he's done a really good job with Dagenham. I think before they were struggling, but now they've got that consolidation, which is really important. And now they'll be able to kick on, and the sky's the limit for Dagenham.
Yeah, definitely. And I promise you, Rochdale fans, I promise, there wasn't a wry smile on my face when Chris made his prediction for you to fall out of the playoffs. I promise you. But yeah, moving on, just because we're approaching time a little bit and we want to keep everything on track. The next game we are going to touch upon is Solihull Moors winning 2-1 at home to Maidenhead. Now, with this one, obviously Solihull are another team that we expect to be up and around the promotion talk and like the promotion contenders, and you know, sort of be up and around it. And look, 2-1 at home is a great start, really. I mean, opening day, Solihull obviously lost to Fylde, which was quite a surprise in many people's eyes, I guess. But again, Nick Horton doing Nick Horton things, like, what can you do? So sort of the response from that to get off the mark at home in your first home game, I think, is important. And I expect Solihull to be up there. Obviously, they've lost some key players, like we spoke about last week, with like Sabara and players like that. But I still think they've got enough in the squad to do something this year. And obviously, Tavon Campbell getting off the mark again this season, I think he's going to be a key player for them. In terms of Maidenhead, again, I think they're probably another team that you're probably going to put down to struggle. I think you can probably, it's a weird division this year, because although we're saying anyone can beat anyone, I think you can tell early doors who are going to be the strugglers, or who you would expect to be the strugglers, and who are going to be the teams pushing for it, can't you? And like, I think that this is a difference here with these two teams. I don't know whether you've got anything else that you want to add on to that, or whether you agree or disagree with that sort of notion.
Yeah, I would agree. I still think it's a bit too early to say about who's going to be, if Sutton's to go down, Sutton's to go up. Whether we've only played 180 minutes of football, so again, it's so early days. But I think Maidenhead will be good. Like I've personally myself, I've written them off every season, and they've stayed up. So I'm going to change my mind. I'll say they stay up, but they'll probably go down because I've said
I was
that.
going to say, so we've
They'll
just got
probably
it
go
on
down
recording
now.
there. We've got it on recording. If Maidenhead do unfortunately get relegated, Chris
blame.
is the man responsible.
So Maidenhead fans, don't come at me, but no, Solihull will be happy. 3 points. I think they needed to bounce back from that Fylde result because they would have been disappointed. But no, I agree with what you said. Solihull, decent, and Maidenhead, they'll be fine.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So next on the list is I'm not going to make the same joke as I made last week, so we'll just get straight into it. Halifax, obviously losing the home opener to a very sort of strong. Well, it's interesting. I'm going to say strong enough, but obviously they've lost some big players in Taladja and Stokes themselves, Aldershot. So it'll be interesting to see where they sort of end up and sort of fight for this year. But Halifax, I think, kind of are following the same sort of pattern as he did last year under Militon in terms of, they work hard to beat. They can beat anyone on the day, but also they can get beat by anyone on the day. They're probably one of the more inconsistent teams in the division. I think that's the first sentiment. And look, 3 points from 6 games is, like a decent average return, really. But I think they'll be disappointed to lose the home opener, especially, wouldn't they, Chris?
Yeah, like to be fair, I thought when we played Halifax last week at their ground, they were strong, but I still thought there was chances for them to be taken, and I think Aldershot did that with an early goal from Josh Barnet. And to be fair to Aldershot, they've had a really strong start against two teams that I think will be in the playoffs, with Forest Green drawing last week 3-3 and now getting all 3 points at the Shea. But Aldershot off to a really strong start, and I think they're a really strong team, and they're just continuing what they did last season. They just fell short, but I think this year they'll be up there, and if they can keep their key players fit, they've got a great team.
I just realised, by the way, I said I presumed it was the first home game just because of that's the way it's been balancing out for the rest of the division. But why have Halifax played 2 home games on the spin? What's the story behind that? Are they just predicting the bad weather? Are they predicting the bad weather coming in and they're trying to get the home games done? Is that what it is?
You know what? They might have 23 home games in a row. That might be the case, but I don't think so. Well, we've had 2 away. Forest Green have 4 away in a row because of their pitch. So I guess it evens out. But sometimes you've got 2 at home, sometimes you've got 2 away. It's just how the league is sometimes. So that's what I would think.
Yeah, definitely. And then to finish us off, we've got a team, again, this is what I mean. This is a team that I think if they can sort off the field antics, and I'm not going to go into a Matt Ugler rant like I did last week because I'll let him breathe for a bit this week until he does something wrong, of course. But York winning 2-0 at home to newly promoted Tamworth. Now, I think York have made some very good signings. I really like the addition of Tyrese Sinclair from Rochdale specifically, and I think the way York were playing in pre-season, sort of very fast counter-attacking, fluid football. I think they know how to move the ball quickly from defence to attack, and the first goal in this game definitely showed that. And I think they'll have aspirations of getting a playoff place themselves for sure. So yeah, it's an interesting one for me with York. Like I said, I think if they can get the house in order off the pitch, they've definitely got a strong enough squad on the pitch to be able to compete. In terms of Tamworth, obviously 2 really sort of strong opposition to start your league campaign against, newly relegated, I should say, Sutton United and York City, that probably shouldn't have ended where they ended last year. So yeah, how do you see that sort of game?
Yeah, York have made some really nice signings. Ollie Pearce from Worthing last season, who scored about 30, 35 goals for them last season in the National League South. I think that was a really statement signing from York, and he's obviously got off the mark with his first goal of the season in front of home fans. And I think York will be happy with their start. 4 points from 6, which is a good start for them. And from a Tamworth perspective, I think they would be happy with the point. The point last week was a strong point against Sutton, who made a banging start who beat Altrincham 5-0, as we've spoken before. And I think they're just trying to get to grips with the division. And I think they'll be happy with the start that they've made.
Absolutely. And look, we are nearly done, but basically the way we are running this podcast this year is because we think, even though we love our listeners and viewers so much, but for our sort of time and work commitment elsewhere, 3 podcasts a week on double game weeks would just be too much. So we are briefly going to touch upon Tuesday night previews when we record the review, if that makes sense. But we won't be doing dedicated shows for Tuesday nights. So you'll just get your Fridays before your game weeks and your Sunday/Monday review with me and Chris, unfortunately. Maybe that'll change as the season goes on and schedules change, but for now that's the way we are looking at things. So I am just going to look ahead to the Tuesday night fixtures and just pick out a couple that I think are worth keeping an eye on, and then we'll do player standout performances, and then we're done for this week. But so straight off the bat for me, I'm looking at games like Barnet, Forest Green, like we just said. I think Dean Brennan has come out and said in an interview, I might be wrong, Chris, but I'm sure he said this. He said a team that finishes above Forest Green will likely win the title, and we've said about not writing teams off early, and Brennan did this a few times last year, and it kind of bit him on the arse a little bit. So it'd be interesting to see, I guess. But I think he is right a little bit in the sort of sentiment that Forest Green will be up there. So if you can get a result off them this season, then you're doing well. So that's one that I'm definitely going to keep an eye on. Also, we've got Halifax versus Gateshead is sort of a interesting one for me, and that would make it 3 home games from 3 for Halifax as well. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see whether they can sort of frustrate their opposition on Tuesday night and carry on that sort of style of play. You've also got what else have you got? You've got Rochdale versus York, I think, as well. Obviously, York at home. I think that's one to keep an eye on as well. 2 teams that I expect to be up and around the conversation for playoffs. And then I think it's quite fair for me to mention my boys maybe at home to Fylde, because as I said, we're going to have tougher tests to face, and I think Fylde are up there. I think they've got a relatively good record against us over the last couple of seasons. We've managed to break one sort of voodoo run against Wealdstone because we didn't have a very good run against them. So, if we can turn it into 3 wins from 3, 9 points from 9, then that will be a very strong start. So I think they're the sort of 4 ones that are jumping out to me, Chris. Is there any other ones, or do you agree with them sort of 4 when you're looking down the list for Tuesday?
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's some other. To be fair, I think Eastleigh Solihull will be a good game. I think Eastleigh 100% start. Only 3 teams have got 100% start, and I think that'll be a good game down there. But I think the key one, I'm not even going to be biased, but I think the game of the round is Barnet at Forest Green.
Yeah,
but I'm hoping we win.
Of course. Definitely one to tune in for 100%. So just before we go, we've decided to, if you weren't here last week, first of all, what are you doing? You can listen back on Spotify or Apple Music at National League Natter if you want to catch up. But we have brought a new segment onto the show called what in fact we haven't come up with a name, so I'm going to come up with a name now and call it the the Olympic podium, that's what we're going to call it, in homage to Paris. So each week, me and Chris will pick 3 players to go in a bronze, silver, or a gold, and give our reasonings, and then we put a graphic up on socials to go with that. Now, last week, we started off quite controversially because, if I remember, Chris put Greg Ollie's hat-trick in. I don't even think it was silver. Was it bronze? No, actually,
no,
Jez,
it was silver.
well,
it was silver.
Yeah, because Jez, our winger, was in bronze, wasn't he? But yeah, you put a geezer scoring a hat trick in second place. So I've got an idea of who takes what for me this week. But it'd be interesting to see what you agree. So I'll go with bronze, and in bronze, I think we've talked about him already, and I think I'm going to give a shout out to Regan Booty from Gateshead. Obviously, 2 assists. 2 assists in the game week, in the weekend, sort of creative, sort of running the show from midfield. I think he definitely deserves a bronze shout. Would you agree, Chris?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think he'll be happy with 2 assists, and for obviously what happened with Greg Ollie with his broken leg, I think to get 2 assists and to get a win is a brilliant achievement for Gateshead and him.
Yes, absolutely. And then would you like to take us to your silver shout, please?
Okay, so you chose an Oldham player last week. So I'm not going to choose an Oldham player. I'm going to choose a Barnet player, and I've already spoken about it already. I'm going to go with Callum Stead. Obviously, opened our scoring and got a brace against Ebbsfleet, which was the difference to get us to 3 points. So my choice for silver this week will be Callum Stead.
Now, instead of causing controversy, I'm going to do what they did back in not these Olympics, just on the last ones. I don't know if you remember, but a quick story. There was a long jump or a high jump, one of the events going on, and basically 2 athletes got the exact same gold medal score in the last round. So the officials let them share the gold medal. And that's basically what I'm going to do here, because I am going to give the joint gold medal to Nick Horton of Fylde and Christian Deutsch of Forest Green, both bagging, braces and 4 teams that have aspirations. So yeah, unless you have any sort of different shouts, would you say that that's a fair way to do it?
I would think so. I think maybe Paul McCallum will be a bit annoyed by that shout, even though he did score 2 as well in the same game. But I think Nick Horton will be a regular person on our Olympic podium for sure.
Yes, and I think now Christian Deutsch has found his goal scoring boots. I think he'll be up there as well a couple of times for definite in the season. But I think that marks the end to game week number 2 already, Chris. Can you believe it, right? All the sort of pre-season, all the sort of go into pre-season games that you don't really want to go to, all that is done now, and there's only 44 games left. I'm joking. But yeah, like I'm sure they'll be flying now we're into the string of it. But as always, you can listen to this podcast anywhere you get your podcast, on Spotify, Apple Music, and also you do have the ability to watch our beautiful faces on YouTube if you wish to do so. And we have been National League Natter. This has been game week number 2, and we will see you. I will see you on Friday with Lauren for the preview, but me and Chris will see you on either Sunday or Monday, depending on what sort of our schedules are saying, for match day number 3. So yeah, see you then.
Brilliant.